Welcome, everyone. So I'm Warren Frace. I'm the Community Development Director. So as I mentioned, today's the outdoor dining workshop. This is actually a City Council ad hoc committee comprised of Councilmember Strong, Councilmember Garcia. So the purpose today, this is a workshop. The committee's already been doing some work, and they'll give you a quick update on that. But before they went any further, it seemed appropriate to check in with the community. So we've sent out notices to the downtown stakeholders, try to get it out on social media, try to make sure everybody that might be interested in this issue, because we know this is an important issue for the community, had an opportunity to come today. So today, we're going to basically kind of talk about what kind of outdoor dining programs we had during COVID. We'll talk about what worked, what didn't work, and then based on that, the committee will take those results, then formulate kind of the next step in the process. There's a sign-in list over there. If you sign up, we'll make sure that you're advised of any future meetings that get scheduled. With that, I'll turn it over to the ad hoc committee members to kind of make whatever comments to get us started today.
I just want to say thank you for being here. I know that it's like right in the middle of the afternoon, but I do appreciate everybody being here. And we did receive a lot of emails about this, so we are getting a lot of response. So this is very important to everyone, but I did want to just say thank you for being here and participating in this important decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. And I think everybody should have some idea of what we were thinking about when we gave our first report to the City Council on how we were proceeding, because we did kind of think about this ourselves, just among ourselves, and what are the things that we'd like to really be interested in and hear opinions on. And so these were some of the things, and these aren't statements of things we think should be done. They're statements of things to consider, things to think about. So one of the first things in our report was, who should control the space? And we said, well, most, if not all, of the restaurants rent their space from a landlord property owner. So restaurants statistically have the worst success rate of any business. Any additional space beyond the rented area should be owned or controlled by the property owner. Any public property adjustments or transfers should be based upon agreements between the property owner and the public property owner. That would be the city in this case, or their authorized agent. Restaurant use of the additional space should only be based upon agreement between the property owner or their agent and the tenant. And those are just concepts. So what additional outdoor space should be under consideration? Well, outdoor space for dining could be located on the sidewalk, the street, balcony, roof, or other public open space such as a park or paved area other than the street. Second, modified private parking areas with consideration for adequate parking being available for the allowed uses of the zone property. And regulations we figured that may need additional attention, depending upon what we proceed with, are our zoning code, parking regulations, elevator licensing regulations, fee structures, traffic planning, including one-way streets, width of travel lanes, impacts and/or conflicts with parking, sidewalk width and pedestrian flow, rooftop and balcony structural requirements, and public safety. And then we're looking at possible meetings, and this looks almost like a combined meeting. I recognize people from almost everything I'm going to mention. Landlord ad hoc, stakeholders ad hoc, public ad hoc, staff ad hoc, and then a final report to the City Council. So those were our preliminary thoughts, and now you're going to help us really proceed and flesh those out and maybe narrow some of them and look at others more deeply. So we welcome your participation. We thank you for coming, and we hope you don't just listen, but actually participate and give us your views, because those are very important to us. Thank you.
Thanks, Fred. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to hear from the city engineer, Dave Athey. He'll give us kind of an update on all the different programs that the city had during the COVID incident.
Thanks, Warren. Hello, everybody. Good to see you all today. I'm just going to go through some slides, give some background, talk about how it started, where we went, and where we ended up. So the pandemic hit in early 2020, and the City Council took action to allow sidewalk cafe seating and parklet seating in the right-of-way. Now, the right-of-way, for all your folks, is basically anything from the front of the building out into the street. So that's the public right-of-way. Kind of shown here on the screen in this area here. Actually, this canopy comes out over the right-of-way, but would include the sidewalks in these areas. So that first action was to issue permits for sidewalk seating, and then later we added, or the city council added, parklets to that mix. And you can see the parklet here in front of the Blast and Brew restaurant. Is it not working? Next slide, Dave, would you hit that for me? Thank you. So we had overall 22 parklets. Now, there were more restaurants that used parklets, but there were some parklets that span more than one building. And so this is a good example of that. A couple restaurants used this one. So we had 22 in the downtown, and here's basically had some barriers that were set up by the city, some nice aesthetically pleasing covers on them in the downtown, and then so this is Park Street. We also had cafe seating, as I talked about. This is an example here, basically tables and chairs on the sidewalk. And we also had park dining. This was a picture taken by, I think, Justin Winery, a screenshot. And then we also had folks who were eating out in the park. We gathered up some picnic tables and put them out there for folks to use. These are some of the elements. Just want to go through these. We went from simple to more advanced. We started off with just the barriers in the right-of-way. And if you've spent any time in Paso Robles, you know it gets warmer in the summertime. So the modification started for each of the parklets. We had tent canopies. We had more of a rigid frame canopy. Then we had custom-built canopies. It's hard to see. Didn't have a great picture, but we also had folks that used umbrellas in the right-of-way. Again, just kind of touch back. There was various elements in the downtown. We had plastic tables and chairs. We had some wood picnic tables. We had some nicer tables that were from within the restaurant. And then we had these kind of steel chairs and different kind of higher up seating. The same element was carried down the street by some of these business owners too. So there was a kind of a whole range of street furniture that was out. Which may be something for folks to consider as moving forward. Oops. Okay, now just talk a little bit about opportunities, stuff to think about if you're inclined towards parklets. There's the, kind of a parklet with, ignore the yellow thing here. This is just temporary for this picture, but a planted type of car barrier here with a wood platform, and they had some, basic art. This is more of a utilitarian type parklet that was set up. This is actually from a manufacturer that makes these. This is the City of London, and they had more of an artistic flair with some of their parklets, which is also an opportunity or something folks may not like at all. And finally, this is just one thing that hasn't been discussed really or considered, but long term, this is the Weinman Hotel down in San Luis Obispo. And they asked to have their sidewalk extended, and they gave up their street parking. I don't know if there was any payment or any kind of deal for that, but that is also another way to create a sidewalk type seating. It may not work everywhere, and maybe nobody likes it. And so basically you can see here the curb is extended out into the street, and which creates this wider area. So this may be appropriate in some areas in the city. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Warren, and have a little discussion with you folks, what you liked and didn't like, so we can write that down and move forward with this.
All right, so this is the public participation part, so Dave's going to help out here. So I think what we're going to do is track 2 lists, things that we like. And then maybe okay. Who wants to start?
I will.
Go ahead.
I didn't like the barriers at all. I know they were the best that the city could do, but the barriers were not very nice looking. They were always dirty, and it always looked bad. The appearance. The other thing, there was, on the really hot days or the really cold days, nobody sat in them. So I think the thing I disliked the most was all that parking was the loss of parking, and that nobody was sitting in them, but those parklets were there 24 hours a day. And that really bothered me because we needed parking, and it was like, what the hell? You know, nobody's using them. And it was a whole lot of days when it's really cold or really hot. So I don't think they need to be taking up our parking at all.
All right, that's a good start. Who wants to be next?
We have a big parking problem downtown, and this would only make it worse. And my other concern is how much are restaurant owners going to pay to use the parking spaces? Since you're now proposing $2 an hour for us to park there, shouldn't the restaurants pay $2 an hour to take up space? Because you're going to lose parking fees.
So like loss of revenue?
Loss of revenue, and our parking program is at a deficit now, and this is only going to increase that if we have fewer parking spaces. And also, I've owned 5 small businesses, and I never got rent space for free. I've owned 5 small businesses, and I never got to rent space for free, which is what the parklets have been for free. We haven't gotten any revenue for renting the parklet spaces from the restaurants.
Okay.
If you double the size of your restaurant, you should double your rent.
So basically,
And so that rent should go to the city because you're using our space. And we're not getting revenue from parking. And the other concern, I'll throw one more in there. If this is just restaurants, why can't shoe stores and art galleries have parklets out front too? I mean, it's only fair.
all right.
I mean, there's a lot of other businesses could benefit from having their business out on the street.
Good job, you took up all my topics.
We'll work together in the future.
All right, who's next? Oh, Carol?
I have a few concerns myself. I agree the barrier appearance was a little bit not great, but for the likes, obviously it helped us through the pandemic, but what it turned out to be was a more vibrant feeling downtown. People love the outdoor dining, and some don't. Yes, we know that. We understand that. As far as empty, sometimes I never had an empty night. Never had an empty lunch. Never had an empty night. So I did like the fact that the people who did want to sit outside, whether it was for pandemic reasons or just because they like to sit outside, had the opportunity to sit outside.
Okay, so it was, in your opinion, appreciated by restaurant customers?
Yes.
Opportunities to sit outside, like
Yeah.
For customers, okay.
I just would like to clear one thing up because it just keeps coming up for the past 2 years. We had a proposal that we proposed to the council and we proposed to other members of the city that we would pay a substantial permit fee for a parklet if they were to remain permanent. The reason why there was just a small permit that we paid for the past 2 years is because of all the discussion of whether they were going to go permanent or not. We not only discussed a permit that we would, come to some sort of agreement. We did propose a number, but we never had that conversation. We, as restaurants,
Let's just capture that there's a possibility of a
revenue
fee program. Okay.
On top of that, we did the math. Some of the restaurants in town did the math of the actual sales tax revenue that you're receiving, 1.5 cents per dollar, and what that would be per year. And I did do the math at the end of the year because we did have the parklet the whole year of 2021. It was substantial. And you're talking about, $2 parking space or $2 per hour parking spaces. If you took the math of even just half the parklets that were up, especially my revenue, sales tax revenue, is probably the mid to higher. It isn't anywhere near the highest. And if mine was going to be substantial, that, what do you call it, neutral? Parking neutral?
Revenue neutral.
Revenue neutral would be easier to achieve because of the sales tax revenue that you can receive through that. At one restaurant we had
increased sales tax revenue.
and I've said this a million times too, at our 2 restaurants, it wasn't additional seating. It was our indoor seating in order to make it spaced properly for the pandemic. We took our tables outside. When we brought them back inside at the end of January, there are many, many, many customers that do not want to sit inside. They don't want to sit inside because of the pandemic. They don't want to sit inside just because they don't want to sit inside. I've had people walk out of the restaurants and we have lost revenue in both our restaurants due to that. Okay. So I like the revenue that comes to us. I don't know how you would say that on your list. But, and then as far as the parking is concerned, with or without the parklets, you still have a parking problem. And one of your esteemed colleagues at one point during the conversations that we had in the 2 years said, yes, we have a parking problem, but we also have a walking problem. Many, many, many nights, I've told you guys that I walk between our 2 restaurants. Many nights the parking lot at next to Marv's is empty. Many nights the parking lot behind right behind here is empty. No one has ever missed a reservation at my restaurant. No one has been later than 5 minutes at my restaurant due to parking. I may have comments later too.
Okay.
I don't want to skip one. Did you want to put as a like that people have options for outside seating?
I'm sorry?
People have options for outside
They
seating.
want options for outside seating. They absolutely.
I think you got that as bullet 2.
That's already there.
And I think if a restaurant wants to have outdoor seating, rent a place that has outdoor seating.
Yeah.
Like Catch and
Right.
other restaurants.
So right now we're just capturing the ideas. Then we'll debate it. So let's hear from everybody first once. So who wants to be next? Mr. Roush?
Just going to echo a number of the things. I can expound on them later if you wish. I think, first of all, my concern is it's fair and equitable to all the businesses. She mentioned, I'm sorry, don't know your name, shoe stores, other things. Perhaps somebody would like to have a sale outside. Not that we don't let that happen now, but if you're going to make them that way. As far as the likes, I'm pretty positive most everybody likes the concept of sitting on the sidewalk and eating if they wish, or sitting inside. They get a choice. So I'm going to go for that too. I think you're creating unfair competition, not just for restaurants, but you're creating unfair competition when you only allow, well, some places can't even have a parklet. You did not allow any parklets on 13th Street, for instance. So you're creating unfair competition for the building owners as well. as it was brought up, I think Councilman Strong brought up that you're looking to the building owners to actually sign up for the parklets. That creates an unfair advantage to those building owners who don't have to build anything, and then they're able to charge more for the rent on their property. I have some real deep concerns about liability for this city. I'm all for sidewalk dining, no problem, but you still have ADA liability. When you allow businesses to use those sidewalks, you're going to have ADA liability. And I will bring up one point. I'm not an expert, but I do know a little bit about it since I'm at the Park Cinemas. Across the street from the Park Cinemas, you permitted barrels to be put out for a wine tasting room. I guarantee you the space between the barrels and the curb were not enough for a wheelchair to turn around, and you're going to have liability problems for ADA. We were made at the theater to put in a 100-year flood overflow and build a tunnel under our building, probably at a cost of a couple $100,000. And we had to take up approximately 600 square feet, which we can't use for renting and building another building, outdoors, so that it takes care of the 100-year flood. So when the 100-year flood, and we don't know what rain looks like anymore, I understand, but when the 100-year flood comes and these parklets are blocking the water and floods the buildings, this city is the deep pockets, and you can talk to your attorney, every city is the deep pockets, and they go after the deep pockets, so there's going to be huge liabilities in that case. And the final thing, which again is brought up, what is the value of these parklets taking up parking spaces? What is the value of those parking spaces? I can give a number of points is they're talking about a parking garage, which we're all talking about, we're all thinking about. My understanding, a 200-space parking garage is $24 million. I believe that's $120,000 per space that you're talking about building. And so is that space that you're giving up for parklets for each of those spaces, are they worth $120,000? Are they worth $2 per hour times 11 hours, $22? So the value of those parking spaces is important to come by, to reach. Because I believe, again, I'm not an expert, but I believe it's illegal for the city of Paso Robles to give away the residents' properties for less than market value. And I will point out the market value for me, it cost me $3 a square foot easily between rent, maintenance, air conditioning, et cetera, to run my building. What is it for a parking space? I'm not sure the square footage you calculated. So those are the concerns I have, and honestly, I don't see, if the restaurants or whomever wishes a parklet doesn't benefit enough to pay fair market value, then we shouldn't be taking away parking when we are trying to create parking and trying to find ways to expand the parking. Eliminating any parking spaces is unfair to all the other businesses that can't take advantage of these programs, is my opinion. Thank you.
Okay, that's very good. Yes.
So, in listening to these concerns.
So could you just introduce yourself and your business just so everybody kind of knows if you feel
I'm sorry.
comfortable?
My name is Christina Aversang. I own Paso Terra Restaurant.
Okay, excellent.
So in listening to these concerns, Carol and I, we have gone in the past year to each one of the councils. We've come up with a number of proposals, first and foremost, to address the financial issue. We went through all the numbers. As we said before, we've always been prepared to, and of course, fairly, to pay for those parklets to whatever the city decides. That's number one. Two, in our design, in Carol's design, and I would say almost everybody else who has a parklet, not barrels, because of our own liability as well, we all have ADA compliance. We have to. So there's not an issue with that. I cannot address barrels because I don't have barrels. Thirdly, is that my restaurant is very small, and my patio is also very small. There are many, many large groups coming into town. I can't service them because they take up my entire restaurant. When we had the parklet, that was easy to do. Thirdly, these, I would say for the restaurants and for downtown business, the majority of our customers, whereas in retail and certainly in the restaurants, is through tourism. And the city benefits by tourism as well. So the tourists can't understand, number one, why we have the parklets and now we don't. In addition to that, they want to sit outside. A lot of it is still to do with the paranoia, but the summer and spring are coming on and people want to eat outdoors, and now they can't. So there's that to address as well. The next point I wanted to bring up, which I've talked about many times, but I will bring it up again because the idea of aesthetics has been brought up time and time again. Understandably so. Understandably so. So what I'm suggesting is that the city should come up with a uniform plan for these parklets that will address all of the ADA, the water flow, we all agree with the water flow, and all the other concerns that the public has, and more importantly, that the city has to make them compliant in all ways and rent them back to us. And those that don't want to have it, don't have it. Those that want to pay, pay. This way, the city's happy, the public are happy, and we're happy. With regard to parking, now, it seems to me since we have the regular downtown parking, there's as much problem with parking as there was before. So I don't see that. There's a lot and Mr. Roush takes up all the parking on Railway with his customers. So I don't think he's got a lot to talk about. Yes, go ahead. You're with me, so.
As far as design standards and ADA, one of the items on our proposal was we would like to work with the city to come up with that. If you remember that big storm, I think it was January of 2021, and we all prepared for, because it wasn't a permanent situation and we didn't anticipate a storm like that. There were some adjustments made in certainly my parklets to make sure that none of the drainage was going to flood, and it worked. And as far as I remember, I think it was you that sent out an email to all of us saying make sure that you've battened down patches and make sure that everything's secure, and we did. One of the things in our proposal was that we would love to, we'd be happy to work with you on ADA compliancy, design standards, drainage, lighting, all of that stuff.
Okay.
It wasn't something that was going to be ignored, and it's not something that we would do for free. It all comes down on our dime. The other thing I want to just address is I agree with John about, like a real good idea of what a parking space is worth, because I have spoken to one of my landlords is a developer, and he has spoken to some of the council members about a parking structure and said that it's a fraction of what the number is that's kind of floating around. He said that he's done parking structures in San Luis Obispo and in South County for a quarter of what has been proposed. So I do believe that he's talked to some of the council members about it, and I just feel like there's some information out there that may not be 100% accurate, or there may be two sides of a coin being considered at this point.
Okay. Who else wants to?
We do have an online caller as well, so when we have a moment.
Okay, so we'll do this lady and then this gentleman, and then we'll go online.
I don't like anything about it. I feel like this is public property. The sidewalks, the streets are public property. The taxpayers pay for that property, and it doesn't matter how much the restaurant owners are willing to pay, it is for the benefit of the few restaurant owners that take that advantage, and it is not a benefit to the citizens of Paso Robles. And that is public property. And as far as the sidewalks, the whole time those parklets and everything were there, especially like between Pine and Park Street on 12th, I wouldn't even walk down that sidewalk anymore because of all the tables and chairs and the crowding. There's only going to be a few business owners that are going to benefit from this, no matter how much they pay. And there's going to be a lot of business owners that wouldn't even have the opportunity to do that, to have that extra space, because they lease or own a property that doesn't have outdoor seating. There's restaurants that have outdoor seating. They've always had outdoor seating. And what I see is that all these things that we did to accommodate the lockdowns for COVID and everything else. And I think it was a good idea that we tried to help the business owners stay in business, but nobody wants to go back. All the benefits that they had, they don't want to give them up now.
Good temporary
it's just like
COVID
people who
temporary
worked at home because of COVID. And now many of those people just don't want to go back to work because they got used to. So I just don't think this benefits the taxpayers of this town.
I agree with that 100%.
Okay, gentleman in the back corner, and then we'll go with the online callers.
I'm speaking for my neighbor who owns Kahuna's on 12th Street, 800 block. He's surrounded by wine tasting and street side and La Conchea, however you pronounce that. And that's taken an enormous amount of parking spots on the north side of 12th Street. And his customers, that's that many less places that they can park if they want to access his shop. So he asked me what this other woman said. Can he put his furnishings, put display racks out in front of his shop so that the customers will be able to affect his business the way he's losing parking for his customers by these food establishments and wine tasting? And he thinks it's not fair, and I agree with him. That's that much less parking that he has for his customers that are taken up by businesses that are making money, profiting from those parklets. He's making nothing. That's that many customers that he can't get into his shop that aren't parking to go into his shop. And I understand that.
Anything else?
That's it.
Okay, we have some online callers we're going to go to, and then we'll go to the back of the room. So Dave, do you have a caller for us? Didn't hear you. Hello, caller, can you hear us?
Oh, yes, I can hear you. Yeah, my name is Pat Addy. I own Cowgirl Cafe. And my concern is the actual amount of parking that we're losing around the park. The aesthetic value in which everybody has grown to love in Paso Robles is kind of being taken away by the outside dining. And my problem with the parking is if you're going to take parking away from a downtown area, then is there a compromise? Is there another parking lot in which these people can go to? Because what happens is you're driving, in my opinion, you're driving all of the traffic and all of the parking to the outskirts of the area. So meaning we're going to have a lot of bar people that are parking in front of my restaurant for hours and hours and hours. And I have a very, I have an eclectic cross-section of customers, but I have a lot of older people too that don't have the ability to walk very far. So if all of the places are taken around my restaurant and they have to walk 2 or 3 or 4 blocks, I've already been told by quite a few that they're not going to be able to participate as often coming into my establishment. So again, if there were alternatives for parking, I wouldn't have a problem with what they're trying to do. But again, the aesthetic value, I think, takes away from everything too. And the parking, especially like the Kahuna's problem, it's kind of the same as mine. People park in front, or they're going to have tables out in front. And then all of a sudden, you know, again, you're putting parking in, parking down the streets, parking in front of people's homes, everything else. So I just, I don't mind having that done as long as there were alternatives for parking. If there were parking structures that I heard mentioned earlier being on the table here in a relative, you know, soon amount of time. But anyway, those are my concerns on with what is going on at the moment.
All right, thank you very much. Do we have any other callers? Just one? Okay, so I think we had a hand raised in the back.
I'm not a business owner, I'm just a citizen of Paso Robles, but I love the downtown parklets. I think they do need to all be looked the same. We come downtown a lot to eat. We bring a lot of visitors downtown, and the first thing they always say is, oh, let's eat outside. They want to eat outside. I've not had a single visitor say, oh no, let's eat inside. Nobody. As far as the parking, I can't tell that it was any easier or harder to find a parking spot with the parklets or without the parklets. You're still driving around looking for a parking spot. It doesn't matter. We came downtown to eat the other night. No parklets. No parking close where we wanted to go. So I think they should be there. I think they should look nice, maybe all the same, and I think they provide a service for a lot of people that want to eat outside. And you've got to remember, these tourists, a lot of them are coming from areas where outdoor dining is a given. And so they're used to it, and that's what they want.
So why don't you put expectation that there will be parklets just because it's become a thing in other towns, maybe? Okay. We have a comment up here. Let's wait for the mic.
I think also you need to take into consideration it hasn't happened yet. It has in at least one other town. When people are here and they're downtown, they're socializing, they're drinking, they're having fun. The streets are more narrow. So when and what is a car going to run into these parklets and cause some serious lawsuits for the city? Parking and sidewalks are a necessity. Parklets are a luxury. And it seems like a lot of people, a lot of residents, a lot of businesses are paying for the luxury of a few people to have those luxuries.
Okay. All right, sir?
I'd like to have a little clarification. You said something about these parklets were generating all this extra sales tax income?
So that was one of the positives was that
well, yeah, but you got to consider that part of that sales tax revenue would still be there if those people were inside. It's not strictly because they were sitting outside that you got all this extra money. Some of those people would be inside, so you shouldn't consider it 100% because of the parklets.
Okay, good point.
There are plenty of restaurants that have outdoor seating built in.
Okay, this lady over here.
So I would speak first as a consumer of the downtown area. I have a dog. I love to eat outside with my dog. Lots of visitors that are staying in our local Airbnbs are bringing their pets, and that was definitely a cool and interesting part and benefit of the parklets is pets. They come and they order off the menu as well. So that is something for me as a consumer of downtown Paso. I also think that it's very family friendly. It encourages families to be able to have a little bit
Say
more.
that again. What was it?
It is a very family friendly atmosphere.
So
larger groups can have strollers or children, and it's not as intrusive as it is in a building and in a restaurant.
Okay.
Speaking as a mom and a dog owner, those would be both of my things that I love about them. I think that we have an average of like 78 degrees in Paso, so let's bank on our wonderful weather and offer that for consumers. Now, as a brand new business owner in the downtown area that had a lovely parklet that I inherited as a new business owner, I feel like my view is a forward, proactive looking view of what it is that us as Paso Robles is looking for our future. How are we going to continue to attract and to maintain tourists and people moving in, and also allowing our locals to have a wonderful, safe place to eat and to dine, whether it's during the pandemic or not. So I really feel like I'm hearing a lot of input being stuck on ugly parklets, lack of parking, and all of these things, which are very, very, very valid. I agree with a lot of them. However, I feel like I really hope to hear this meeting continue in a way to say, what do we love about them and how can we create them in a way that is safe, compliant, structurally sound, aesthetically pleasing, and is mutually beneficial to the restaurant as it is to the clothing store right next to it, where we can have someone sit and they're looking in the window, oh, that looks like a great thing, I'm going to go into my neighbor's place. I feel it creates a stickiness factor to people spending more time downtown when they can eat outside. I also do know that at my particular restaurant, we didn't increase our seating. We made it safer to sit inside farther away. So we took tables that we had inside and we moved them outside to maintain that level that we pay highly for our monthly rent. Okay. Yeah, that's my input.
We do have two more callers.
Okay. Caller, you're on. Can you hear me, caller? You're on.
Cody Ferguson here. I'm a Paso Robles resident for 75 years. I think people better start thinking about the history of the downtown. We have quite a history. It includes a dead downtown, some of it because of parking, a lot of it because of parking. This is an age-old question with us. You're interested in tourists. Well, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, maybe even part of Thursday, you're interested in locals because that's what eats there, downtown. And we also like to shop downtown. And if you take up the parking spaces with parklets, you're going to kill the downtown. We've been through it before, twice. So it's time for somebody to wake up and bring back the history of doing things like this. Then you want to add in $2 an hour per parking up till 9 o'clock, 8 or 9 o'clock at night. Well, you're going to kill the downtown for locals. There's a whole bunch of us that drive in and go to your restaurants and go to the theater and so forth. We have to be able to park to do that. And if you take away the parking with parklets, oh, yes, you're going to have all this atmosphere and so forth and all the arguments I've heard in favor of it. And by the way, for the lady who thinks Mr. Roush shouldn't be parking on Railroad Street, Mr. Roush helped rescue this town. You probably weren't here then. So this is an age-old question. We've been through it before. There's plenty of history. I think it's time for people to start studying it.
Okay. Thank you, Cody. All right. One more call. Caller, you're on.
Hello?
Go ahead. We can hear you.
Hi. My name's James. I'm a new resident to the Paso area. Moved in about a year ago, just over a year ago. And I'm not a business owner in town. I'm just a member of the general public. And from my family's perspective, we really enjoy the parklets. It gives people, locals and tourists alike, different choices and places to dine, to have drinks, to entertain, bring people in from outside, generating more income for the city. Personally, the parking around the park itself in downtown is, I feel like you need a college degree to figure that out, because the amount of people I see trying to figure out a machine how to pay for parking is just ridiculous. And so, I mean, the weather in California is just perfect for outside dining. And personally, I know I don't want to go into a restaurant to dine, mostly because of the pandemic. And so I feel like it actually allows businesses to generate more income and employ more people, and that then goes into the community. And I had to notice when I was last in SLO, and I know that's 40 miles away, they still have their parklets. And I was just telling my wife the other day, it's like, I really miss that. Because I feel like I can't go anywhere in downtown to enjoy a meal or have a drink without having to go inside. And that's just kind of disappointing.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other callers?
So pro parklet.
I think this one.
Yeah, I think we have one more.
Caller, you're on.
Hi, this is Lynn Peel. I'm calling regarding the downtown parklets in Paso Robles. I am so in favor of them coming back. We enjoyed sitting outside. The weather is good more often.
She dropped.
Did we lose her? Okay. We got the gist of that. Okay. Any other comments? Wait, let's see. I don't think we've heard from this lady over here, and then we'll do round two.
My owner couldn't be here, but I'm on here for behalf of Yanagi Sushi Bar.
Could you hold the mic a little closer?
For Yanagi Sushi Bar,
Okay.
just on here as the manager. But we appreciated the outside seating as we could accommodate more customers because we have always like 20 plus customer big party groups. Downside, it just stressed out a lot of our servers because everyone's understaffed. I think it can apply to anybody here. But also the only downside is we make a lot of income from to-go and we could not have parking spots available for our customers. So a lot of them would illegally park in the alleyway, which would not accommodate for any of our other businesses around us because they couldn't get their deliveries. So I think if we could like shorten our little parklet thing, it would be great. But obviously I understand because it'd be too small. But yeah, thank you.
All right. Any other first round comments? Oh, another caller. Caller, you're on.
Hello. Am I on the air now?
Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Great, thank you. Hi, my name's Lynn Peel. I would love to see the parklets come back. The weather is good here more often than it's not. They had the outside heaters up. It seemed that the restaurants were busier with the parklets up. I've been down a few times since they've been taken down, and it just kind of looks like a ghost town again. I know that they've left them up in San Luis Obispo, and that seems to have worked pretty good for them. And I would think that the restaurants would, the city would recuperate more money from the taxes that the restaurants earn than from the parking stalls themselves.
Okay. Is that all your comments?
Yep, that's about it. Thank you for your time, and I hope that everybody has a good day and stay safe.
All right. Thank you. Fred?
Yeah, I especially enjoyed Kelly Ferguson bringing up history, because I think a couple of things should be straightened out that we have, and maybe David can help me on one of them too. But first of all, let's go back to the people paid for the downtown streets. Those downtown rights-of-way were never paid for by the taxpayers. They were dedicated to the city upon its creation in the 1800s. It was part of the original town that was given to us. So it is public property. but no taxpayer ever paid for it. The owners of the rancho that created the city created those streets. Now, they weren't paved yet, so eventually we had to pay for the paving and things like that, the improvements to the streets, but not the streets themselves and not the property itself. So just so we understand that part. East side, that's something else. We annexed that, and some of that we got streets with, some of it we didn't, and taxpayers did have to build. And a lot of it, by the way, even that we think we paid for, was from grant money. We get a lot of grant money from the state and from the federal government, especially for streets, roads, highways, things like that. And I think David can attest to that, that there's quite a bit that comes in for those purposes. Now, is that taxpayer money? Yeah. It's your federal taxes that you've paid in. It's your state taxes you've paid in coming back home for your benefit. So to that extent, you paid it, but it's kind of mixed up with everybody else's, and it may not be proportional. Now, why do we have the parking at all? Why do we have this situation? For 20 years, I have to credit Norma Moy and Main Street have tried to get the downtown owners of the businesses to require their employees to park elsewhere rather than right in front of the stores so that the customers could use the parking places. But when we had the earthquake in 2003, there were a lot of cars were damaged from buildings came down. Every single car belonged to an employee. Not one car on the street was a customer's car. And that was the problem. But we couldn't, for 20 years, we couldn't get it done. That's when the council decided we have got to open the parking up for the public and for the customers, whether, no matter who they are, whether they're residents here or whether they come from somewhere else, because we're all Americans. We have the right to go where we want and buy where we want and stay where we want. That's one of our rights as an American citizen. So I'd just like to make sure everybody understands that. We did get an estimate, it was in 1919 or 1920, on what the cost per space would be for a parking garage. And I'm trying to remember, I think that estimate from some market analysis was about $46,000 a space in those dollars at that time. And we have had inflation since then, so that would have to be factored in. But do you remember it any differently than that? Okay. Right. But the actual construction of the per space came to about that. And I guess that was based on downtown prices of that property as well. So just a few things for us to keep in mind. And there were a lot of good points brought up here, a lot of good points. We didn't hear a lot of suggestions as to any alternatives though, from anyone. A lot of the restaurants in the past have chosen to have on sidewalk parking or dining instead of in the street. And some of that might be possible. It might be one of the solutions we could do. Now, David brought up something else, and I think that was brought up in one of the illustrations he had of people extending the sidewalk out to accommodate dining and still have walkway for the public. And that would be a possible alternative. We have to find out who's going to pay for it, how much are they going to pay, what are the standards going to be. There would be a lot of things that would have to be considered in that. But those are things that have been mentioned, but nobody's thought too much of it. Some of our restaurants, before we ever had parklets, did opt for the on the sidewalk park or dining because they had a wide sidewalk, they had the space to do it. And even after we created the parklets, we had a restaurant over on 14th Street that decided that that's exactly what they wanted to do, was on the sidewalk dining. And we allowed that, and in that case, they did build the sidewalk out a bit. And they, at their own expense, so they created the additional space so they could have the dining on the sidewalk. So those are a number of things when we're looking at this overall problem. And this committee is still, it is not a parklet committee. It is an outdoor dining committee. And we haven't heard much talk about outdoor dining and any of the other possible things we have looked at other than parklets. So I don't know what anybody thinks about, are the roofs of any of these buildings sufficient for that? Is there any place to put an elevator to take people up to the roof? Would there be any restaurants interested in doing that, or on a balcony that would hang out over the sidewalk that was part of the building? There are a lot of different options that might be considered for outdoor dining that wouldn't necessarily have to be in the street. And that doesn't mean that some parking in the street isn't appropriate either. And then the question would be, if we take up too much parking, though, how do we have customers come in? Maybe those who have it would help to fund a shuttle between the hotels so that the visitors wouldn't have to necessarily drive down and take up parking spaces. They could just shuttle down, do what they wanted to do, and have the shuttle actually take their things back to their hotel, et cetera. I mean, there's so many different possibilities, but I haven't heard any opinions about anything except parklets. So I'm wondering if anybody has any other ideas.
I do agree with you. I think there are other options that we can consider. One option that's been floated out there a number of times is, and it'll make everybody crazy, but around the park, they're doing one lane of traffic and having it one way all the way around the park. I know that there was somebody, Billy Grant, at one of the council meetings, I think in September, he was talking about, like basically making it kind of an outdoor, I can't think of the word, like a piazza or something like that. Where
Not a mall.
parking. A mall, yes, exactly. And it's, I just think that I agree with you 100%. I think there are other options if the parklets weren't amenable. And I just think that, like, we can consider possibly, making it one way all the way around the park.
Okay, that's a thought there. Yes. Pardon me, I don't want to take over your job, Warren.
No.
I'm starting to call on people.
If we're looking at it from your basis, Fred, thank you. I'm all for anything you can do on the private property. If an owner of a property wants to do rooftop dining, I would even be before the city waiving permit fees to do that. It's going to be costly for them to do. Certainly. Concept of balconies out over the sidewalk. Are we going to have balconies over every sidewalk? I don't know about that. But in general, I think most people, there's probably some that just literally don't want anybody in the world eating outdoors. But most people like the concept of eating outdoors. I applaud that completely. So the sidewalks, figure it out. If you can do that, that doesn't impact other businesses as long as you can figure it out so the customers of Kahuna's can walk by, so the customers of Kahuna's or the general store who started a lot of this parking stuff can see their building. A loss of sight of their building is a disaster for them. The general store was pretty much shut in where you couldn't see it anymore. So if you can have the outdoor dining and be fair to every other business, and by the way, the backyard, the owner of the backyard wrote an eloquent letter, I hope the city council has read it, wrote an eloquent letter about how the problems it creates for him. He came up with the concept of building a restaurant basically all outdoors. He had to put in parking. The city made him take part of his parking lot, part of his property, and build parking. So now we walk in and I'm all for everybody, please. Carol, I came to your place numerous times. Christina came to your place numerous times. I was at your place the other day. I mean, I eat out all the time. I don't cook, so whatever. I'm all for everybody succeeding and being successful, but you have to be fair. We've got backyard, spent a fortune to do outdoor dining. Fish Gaucho. They have a wonderful little patio. They have to pay property tax on that. They have to pay maintenance on it. And now you turn around and you basically, during the pandemic, no problem. I have no problem with anything you did in the pandemic. But to make these permanent and only allow for certain businesses, that is just completely unfair. And that's the thing I'm against. if you can cover sidewalk seating and figure that all out, I still say you have a liability, and the city is the deep pocket. So be careful of that, is the only thing I would suggest.
And it would be and it would depend upon whether we leased it to them and still were the underlying owner, or whether we sold the property to them at market rate. In which case, they would have the liability. We would no longer have any liability.
I'm not sure, I'm not the legal, Fred, but I know you did make a comment about the city never paid for anything, and it's et cetera, et cetera. My understanding is the property owners on each side of the street actually own the property to the middle of the street, but there's a right-of-way that the city owns. So
in some areas, it depends on how the deeds are written.
Okay, so
that's true.
I'm just saying there's a lot of, it's the parklets that I'm against. I'm against taking up parking when we're fighting like crazy over paid parking. I'm really against this concept constantly that it's the tourists we want to bring downtown. I'm sorry, the residents of this city is basically this city. It's not the city council, it's not the city staff, it's not the merchants, it's the city residents are the residents of Paso Robles, and in my opinion, they own the city.
Okay, John?
So when we make it hard for them to take part in their city, to come to the park, for instance, a simple thing. I don't want to get into parking fees and all that junk, Fred, but to use the playground at the park, if you're going to charge them parking fees, my God, this just makes no sense. It's totally irrational to be sitting here talking about parking problems and then to take away parking for the use of private businesses.
John, thank you. And you reminded me of one piece of history I didn't mention. Our downtown was boarded up, pretty much, until John agreed to put a theater in the downtown. And that was the beginning of the revitalization of the downtown. So, John, we all owe you a debt of gratitude for what you did.
I owe and I'm fighting for the residents because I owe the residents of this city for my success.
True.
I truly say that.
But you put your theater in the right spot, and that was a good thing. And there was somebody else, yes.
Okay.
I just wanted to say that I agree with everything he says, because you're putting those little tick marks on everything, and I agree with everything he said.
Okay.
Put a lot of check marks.
All right. Let's go over here, then we'll go back over here.
I have a question. How many parking spots were taken up by parklets throughout 69? And those were from like the whole entire time they pretty much stayed occupied?
No.
No, okay.
It varied throughout the pandemic. It ramped up. At the height of it was 69, and then at some point we took some parklets away because the owners didn't want them anymore. But essentially it was 69 for probably a majority of the time.
And what, do you have an idea of like what the number of parking spots are in like the downtown corridor or however it's defined? 465?
There you go. I didn't know that. Thank you.
Cool, that's interesting, thank you.
Okay, let's go to the back part and we'll come back here to the front.
So, Garrett from Cahoon's texted me and wanted to know if the parklets are approved, can Jade, Soul Tree, General Store, and his shop, can they move out onto the sidewalk, out onto the street and have display racks where Gary could put shirts and shoes and compete with the restaurants? Because the restaurants should not have a toehold in the city. If they're making money, why can't Gary? Why can't he move out into the street?
Okay. So that's what we're talking about. So that's a fair question.
Thank you.
Back to the front again.
Okay, so I certainly understand if we're talking about the concerns of the retailers. Most of the retailers I've talked to are happy when the parklets were there because more people are in town, more people take their time eating, and there they go and walk the streets and see what's going on, look at shoes, look at dresses. That's one. Secondly, that if Kahuna's and General Store and others want to have their concessions outside, then the logical thing to do, certainly on the park and on the park on 12th Street, is to just close the street to traffic altogether.
so that people can walk freely with not to be hit by cars. That's happened in a lot of cities, a lot of cities. One-way parking in a lot of the downtown would make a lot of sense too. But certainly if these retailers want to be outside, which is understandable, they have to have a place to go. Now, with regard to the pedestrians, certainly 12th Street is crowded, but it's been crowded, parklets or no parklets. So that's a different issue. Putting tables outside on the sidewalk is very dangerous because the pedestrians are there. And, you know, some pedestrians may not be walking straight. So who knows if they're going to go bump into a table or something's going to happen. So not a good idea. Extending the curb is much like you did up on 12th Street is a very interesting idea.
Okay, I think Jean in the back.
Are you sure? Do you want to move on? I can keep it zipped. Fred, you were right. In 2006, for 2 parking spaces, it was $29,000, and for 3 parking spaces, it was $48,000. That was in 2006. Good memory. So I guess to me, the bottom line is that we have 2,000 employees in the downtown area. At any given time, it's probably about 800 employees that are working. We have 465 parking spots. No matter what, there's nowhere else for the employees to park unless we get a parking structure. So the Downtown Parking Commission is actually actively having that conversation right now about a parking structure, and I think a lot of these challenges with the outdoor dining would be eliminated if we had a parking structure. And so if we are to be able to move forward with that plan, my recommendation would be to simultaneously move forward with a plan to actually extend sidewalks. What does the infrastructure look like at that point so that we could have more outdoor seating? I think rooftops are a great idea, all those things, but it is time. And so we can look at options like, 1 day of no paid parking for the locals and things like that, because we definitely need to be fair to everybody. But in the meantime, I think the parking structure would eliminate the majority of those concerns.
Okay. Any final comments? All right.
Closing the street is preposterous. I mean, we have a parking problem, and let's close the street and make it a whole lot worse. How many parking spaces are there around the park that we're going to lose to that? Yeah, let's lose another 200 parking spaces and get nothing from it.
Plus our emergency services
Sally?
go up and down those streets as a throwaway. And we don't want to close streets and not let them get where they need to go in a timely manner. They would have to go around downtown. So I think that we have to think about emergency services, both police and fire.
Okay, Katie? We have a caller? Caller, can you hear us? Not yet.
Hi, this is Carolyn. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
I was a huge fan of all the outdoor dining. I miss it. I'm wondering if we can extend the sidewalk. I was in favor of the sidewalk cafe idea. What about doing that in the square? If I realize this isn't a parking workshop, but I'm happy to park a few blocks away if the city council is doing something about parking exemptions for handicapped and senior citizens. Maybe that could be a good idea. And can the city provide more tables in the square so we can still support local restaurants, dine outside? Can I pick up a bottle of wine and at Basil and some Thai noodles and walk across the street and dine myself? We were doing that during the pandemic. Is that still an option? That was all.
All right, thank you, caller. Do we have any other callers? Can you hear us, caller? You're on.
Yes, I can hear you. Yeah, this is Steve Sidwell. And Fred brought up the idea that there weren't too many alternatives presented. I'd like to toss out some more practical than others, but none of them unrealistic. Some have been mentioned. Park dining, back patio dining, rooftop dining, alleyway dining to the extent feasible, or from a different perspective, since it's basically a revenue equation. Open earlier, open later, open 7 days per week, plus open earlier and later, and last but not least, raise pricing to accommodate for what you need. My wife and I eat downtown very frequently, but I will not support anything that either takes up existing parking spaces or narrows existing walkways. Walkways are for people, parking spaces are for cars, and we have a little bit of a scarcity of both. So that's my opinion. Thank you.
All right, thank you, caller. All right, comment in the back.
Are we talking about dining in the park yet?
So we're talking about everything. So yeah, if you want to make a comment about dining in the park, feel free.
I don't know if it was last summer or summer before when the city set up that thing in the park. That was wonderful. And I have to say that myself and a group of friends were there every single Friday night during the summer. And we supported all the restaurants. Every week we went someplace different and got our meal. And, you know, it would be great if the restaurants would put a server out there and take your order and then bring it back to you. But we loved it, and that was a wonderful thing.
Okay, excellent. Did you have a comment, sir? So I think we have a comment up here. Marcy?
Any problem I see with extended sidewalks? You come up like Pine Street and you have those extended pickup trucks parked there, you can barely get through. If they're going to pull the sidewalk out another 3 feet, this guy's going to be in the middle of the street.
Okay.
I mean, it says compact parking only, but they don't pay attention to it.
So I think when we're talking about extended parking, probably the parking goes away. So keep that in mind as part of the discussion. That means basically removing the parking spaces to make the sidewalk wider in most cases.
You delete the parking altogether then?
Not necessarily. It may be that, have you looked at the difference between the angle parking, for instance, around the park and the angle parking on 15th Street? 15th Street has a much more severe angle. So it reduces your spaces per block by about 2. But it allows more of the street to be used for driving and less space, width of the space used for parking. But it still accommodates the parking. So there's different ways to do parking.
There's a bunch of different ways that could work.
We left the streets that you can do that on.
Yeah.
I don't think every street would qualify.
That's very true. So John?
One comment I'd have with extending the sidewalks is it's going to be expensive no matter how you look at it. And if we're to spend the money to extend the sidewalks, let's build a parking garage. Or at least acquire property and have more parking someplace. That's all I can comment on that.
Okay, so this is good. So this is what we wanted. We got a lot of things up here. So now we wanted to actually go through an exercise to kind of rank them. So everybody has a chance to choose what they think are the most important things. So the way that's going to work, everybody's going to get 6 stickers. So the red stickers, or let's see, the green stickers are going to go on likes and options. So you got 3. So you can put 3 on one thing, or you could put none on everything. You don't have to use a sticker, but if you want to put all yours on one, you can. If you want to spread them around, you can. Things that you're concerned about, red stickers over here, same rules. You can put as many stickers wherever you want, or put no stickers up if you want. Does that make sense?
No. 3 stickers, and you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
You got to choose.
18, 19 concerns, and we get 3 stickers.
So some of these, I think we'll end up kind of combining these. There's some overlap. So vote for the thing you think best reflects what your concern is. How about that?
This is going to end up like the survey they had before they did the parking study, that people were concerned about parking. That's what they said, concerned about parking, and what was read into it was, we have to put in paid parking. Most of the people that were concerned about parking wanted a parking structure, period. So I'll just stay out of the sticker.
It's not a perfect system, but I think it'll at least kind of show us some trends. So I think, and that's why we have the council here, they kind of will get the gist of it, but I think it'll give everybody the opportunity at least to kind of explain what they might be most concerned about. So Marcy will hand these out. Take your time sticking your stickers wherever you choose or don't choose. And then I think we'll just wrap up.
While you're doing that, I want to thank you all for coming and tell your friends we will have at least one more of these, because we do want to refine these ideas as they come up and as we start to move in a particular direction. So we're going to need more of your input, more of your thoughts, and think positively, not just negatively. Don't just tell us what you don't like, or if you don't like something, tell us an alternative. What would you do instead that would be better? Okay?
Solutions.